The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus was teaching in a synagogue on the Sabbath, and a woman was there who for 18 years had been crippled by a spirit. She was bent over, completely incapable of standing erect. When Jesus saw her, he called to her and said, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." He laid his hands on her, and she at once stood up straight and glorified God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant that Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, said to the crowd in reply, "There are 6 days when work should be done. Come on those days to be cured, not on the Sabbath day." The Lord said to him in reply, "Hypocrite, does not each one of you on a Sabbath untie his ox or his ass from the manger and lead it out for watering? This daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound for 18 years now, ought she not to have been set free on the Sabbath from this bondage?" When he said this, all his adversaries were humiliated, and the whole crowd rejoiced at all the splendid deeds done by him. This is the good news of our salvation. In the Gospel of St. Luke, as in the other writings of the New Testament, there is this new interpretation of the Mosaic Law and what is understood to be the third commandment of the 10 Commandments. You must keep holy the Sabbath day. But in the tradition of the Jews, holiness meant that you could not work. And then they would interpret what it meant by work over the years. And as time went on, the Jews determined that you could only rest on the Sabbath and no work could be done. And so Jesus, in his public ministry, was teaching that the work being done is an act of mercy and an act of charity, an act of belongingness. And in today's gospel, we see that being performed by Jesus. What is interesting in this episode, of the many episodes of cures, and even them on the Sabbath, Jesus went out of his way. Sometimes in the gospel, a person would beg Jesus to cure either himself or herself, or someone who was close to them, a son, a servant, or a mother-in-law. This was part of his ministry. But he's telling the Jews of his day they must interpret the Mosaic Law by the underlying bonding that was there. They were bonded to God in intimacy and love, and they were bonded to one another. And this was the primary commandment, as Jesus will formulate. I must love those whom I love in the way I love them, because he was telling how his Father loved them too. There is another point that Jesus is making in this reaching out to this woman who for 18 years was bent over. She couldn't look up even to see the sunrise. He was saying something here, that she was a daughter of Abraham. And in the Gospel of St. Luke, this affirmation, this assertion, this focus that women and men were both descendants of Abraham, both part of the chosen people, but part of God's own family. There was no superiority of men over women in the teaching and in the gospel of Jesus. And a little bit later in this same chapter, he will cure a man who had another disease, because he was a son of Abraham. The daughters, sons of Abraham were equal before the Lord. Each had their own function and their own talent, and therefore they would follow their own dynamism, their own creativity. But there wasn't more important members of God's family simply because one was a man and the other was a woman. This was a teaching of Jesus, and in many times, in many places in the history of the church, we lost that deep insight. We are first of all made to the image and likeness of God. And in the New Testament, we are made to the image and likeness of the crucified, glorified Jesus. He is the one who has redeemed us, saved us, and recreated us. And there is no superiority by our sexuality. Society and culture struggle to keep the equality of men and women in focus and translate it into the structures and laws of a culture. But Jesus is telling us that he loves men and women as much as one another. He has no superiority, or he doesn't put a special role on women. In his public ministry, Jesus will cure his members of his community, the chosen people of his day, whether they were men and women. And what is very wonderful, a little bit earlier at the beginning of chapter 8 of his gospel, St. Luke tells us that in Jesus' ministry, during his public life, a group of women accompanied him, and these were the women he cured, not only from diseases, but from moral sicknesses too. So Jesus was not just objectively healing people, he was healing them from the heart. And that is what he wants us to do. Do not think because you were born a man or born a woman that in the eyes of Jesus and his heavenly Father, that one is more important than the other. Equality before the Lord comes as we are members of the divine family, in which everyone is of infinite worth in the eyes of Jesus.